Are we recording? I know we're recording. Thanks, Dylan. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to What's the Hazard? This is Doug, and it is Friday, August 23rd, I'm told.
Multiple times.
Yeah, you've been told multiple. I did take my brain supplement this morning, too, so apparently it hasn't kicked in yet, or maybe it's too late for that. I don't know. We'll see. But, well, good morning. I hope you had a good week. I had a decent week. We'll talk a little bit about that. I want to introduce my guest, Kody Hoover, good friend, safety and health professional. I think we've known each other throughout the entirety of the time you've been a safety professional.
Yeah.
And that has added up to quite a number of years, as we will mention here. Yeah. I do want to say Friday the 23rd, tomorrow, is the 50-mile march, the march from Lincoln to Omaha, in support of homeless veterans and veterans that are struggling with mental health issues. I know you're a veteran. This is near and dear to lots of people's hearts. And so tomorrow evening, the group will march from the Capitol in Lincoln, Nebraska, to La Vista, which is essentially a suburb of Omaha, 50 miles overnight. Pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
You know, and they're rucking. Typically, they're rucking a pack or something in order to raise money for these very noble undertakings. So for our friends, Abby Cherney, Chip Frazier, for those of you that remember Chip Frazier, a safety and health professional from the Omaha area who is coming back into town for this event. Guy's in his 70s, and he's going to march 50 miles.
Wow.
I think he's marching with his son and his grandson, if I'm not mistaken, so that's pretty cool. Jay Morales, you know, our friend from the show, that's the organizer, he'll be marching along with them. We have a friend, my wife and I have a friend, Diana, who's going to be participating. So for everybody that's participating, very noble. Congratulations. I hope it's a good march for you. I hope you raise lots of money. So it's not too late. You could probably get online right now and contribute some money to this event. That would be a noble thing to do as well. So that being said, let's get to it. Kody Hoover, safety and health professional, wave to the yeah, exactly. A nice wave.
Boy.
So how long have you been doing this, man?
15 years.
15?
Yeah.
That seemed to have gone by quickly from my perspective.
It flew. So I remember being the young, very, very motivated and driven and wanting to learn as much as I can. So now I'm the cynical, salty safety person.
You've been doing it for a while.
I've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, and you've been doing it well, man, if I do say so myself.
I mean, I guess that's your opinion on me. So I appreciate that.
No, and I thought it would be interesting. I don't know if you saw the episode, but a few weeks ago, Ben Thornburg was on, and he talked a little bit about utilizing AI in a safety perspective, you know. I thought was very interesting. We just really touched on a few things. You have also been utilizing technology to enhance our ability to perform this type of work, which I also think is really fascinating. And so I'd like to get to that. Ultimately, that's the destination where I would like to arrive. But in order for those things to make sense, there typically have to be pain points along the way where you think there's got to be a better way to do this. And I would just like to get back. You've been a manager of programs in large manufacturing facilities. Some of them have, you know, like one site, some multiple locations. But you've been in the food world. You've been in the, I'm going to say explosives, you know, making articles. And you've also been in the chemical world. And so you've seen quite a bit. If you wouldn't mind, just kind of a retrospective of 15 years of your experiences, where are people, or where have you experienced having the biggest challenges with actually implementing a safety program, man?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges when we're talking about the safety program itself is we need some sort of identity first. We need to understand how the process works. I often, you know, I made the mistake when I was younger where I just made it completely compliant. Lockout, tag out has to be 147, and it's almost written like the OSHA book. And without putting any sort of the company's DNA within that. And so I think that was one of the pain points, because when you make it that general, it's really hard for the employees or the management team to actually implement it into what they need to do. And it's not like they didn't want to do it. I just never, at least from my perspective, I never did a good enough job to show them, hey, this is how it would work. And that was at the very beginning. Now, as I moved on to my career, I understood that kind of, you have to understand the process first. You have to get to know the people. You have to see what they're really doing. And then our job is we should understand the regulation well enough that we can create a program or a manual that's kind of a fit for purpose. And so that way, stuff that they're kind of doing, maybe we're going to make it a little bit better, a little bit safer. And then articulating that in an easy way for them to read it. And that's what I think was successful from making programs is just not making it too generalized. We have to put the company's DNA in there as we're doing this. So
that is a really interesting observation, man. Really profound, actually. In 15 years, probably learning, through trial and error to some degree, because I see that often with new, young, unconfident, inconfident,
sure.
Without confidence,
both.
Whatever that is. They start with the compliance piece.
Yeah.
And don't, as you said, don't understand the DNA of the company and how that fits into the processes and procedures of that company. I see that all the time, but I've never articulated it like that. And you want to tell them, on your first day, don't start, jamming, 1910, 147 down people's throats. Learn what your people are doing, but they're just too anxious. They just can't sit back and learn and watch.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things with the new safety person or a new safety person coming into a new company is they want to say, I want to look at the program and tear it apart, and that's really not the way that you want to do it. You want to observe, and you want to kind of just see, start asking questions more of, hey, how come we're doing it like this, and just remember to take notes of this and see if this matches what the program itself says. I'm assuming, which we talked about a lot, is work imagined versus work performed. It's not, and so that's where you have to figure out, is this a normal practice? Is this not a normal practice? But it takes some time, and so if it's nothing that it's where I would say that it's in dire need to make a change, then don't worry about it at the moment. Just kind of digest everything that you're doing. But I see that a lot in the programs. They'll use J.J. Keller, which I hate. I hate J.J. Keller. And it's just put your company's name, and then we'll give you a program, and it meets all the compliance needs. But if you really want to elevate yourself as a safety professional, if you want to be the person that's like, why? I want to be invited to the party. I want to be the person that, hey, they're happy to see me in these meetings. Then we have to go at this from a different approach and do it the way that is fit for the operations side. We got to fit with operations and not have operations fit our needs. So
that's so interesting, man. That's really observant. I mean, I think that's very true, and sometimes you don't realize that when you're seeing it. But the whole J.J. Keller thing, and obviously they're an incredibly successful company, and they served a purpose, but that purpose is just framework, right? That isn't the program.
Right.
You cannot print that crap off and say, here's my program. It might establish a baseline for you. It might help you actually learn what the regulations are calling for, but it isn't your program. But there's a lot of people that are kind of stuck in that world. So you've trained a lot of young safety people. You've had safety coordinators and site safety people that have worked for you over the years. And most of them come in with that eagerness, and they want to just start changing things.
Yeah.
And that's tough, man.
It is tough. I always have to remind them. I said, we also work for that company. I actually had a discussion with a person yesterday about that. I said, ultimately, you work for the company. I said, so we know that you know the stuff. They know that you know the regulation. Your job is to advocate for the company itself too, the employee as well. But it's not to go against the company and try to hamstring them from making decisions or doing these things because we're making safety sound scary.
Mm-hmm.
He said our job is to interpret the program and see if this, once again, if this fits. Is this okay? Is the acceptable level of risk okay for this job? And if you can say, yeah, I think this is, move on.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to just kind of bully their way in there, and which I see a lot. So,
but that is very common. I see
super common.
I see it frequently as well, man.
Yeah.
And so specific pain points. Most people are at this point are familiar with safety and health management systems. They're familiar with the basic elements of a system: management, commitment, employee engagement, site analysis. And can you talk a little bit about what you've seen and learned, and your opinions of the import and the necessity for these different elements, just from the standpoint of management commitment? Most people believe that's perhaps the most important part of all of this, that management is on board. How have you seen that, and what does that look like if it's effective?
Yeah, it's one of those where it's important to have in there, but it's really important that I don't think when they make the management commitment, the management team or the leadership team at the site, I don't think they really know what that is. I don't think we do a good enough job. We don't talk about it. And so I would encourage any safety person, as they're having some of these meetings, if you don't have really anything to talk about that day, I mean, let's hope that you're so good at the job that everything's going well, is to bring up the management commitment.
And what that actually means and looks like.
And ask them, what do they think that means? Or how do they think that they're going to apply it? Because once again, this comes from the CEO or the top person at that company that signed off on this. And so, but when we bring in new management team or supervisors or leads, I've never seen anybody discuss the management commitment. And I think that's, once again, that's a lack of communication, where they don't maybe understand that, hey, our senior leader said that we're going to do X, Y, Z, and we'll accept nothing less beyond that. We will accept no exception for this. And so, but if they don't know, if the leadership team doesn't understand or know what to do or what was told, then they will make decisions that may not be the best, or they may seem like, hey, they're always trying to do the opposite of the safety person. Maybe it's not intentional, but maybe it's because they may not really understand that what they're doing is actually causing a little bit of problem. Yeah, and then how the management commitment said we needed to follow this. Now that could be one of the elements. There could just be an asshole of a supervisor, which we've seen. So, but yeah, I think we just need to talk about it a little bit more. And so, but it is important, and they need to make sure they understand it. We need to understand how they interpret it, and how they're going to implement that, and what they need from us to help achieve that goal. Because they're in charge of their own people. We're in charge of safety. Once again, our job is to help guide them. And so a department here might think this is how they're going to do it. And, we need to give them a little bit of authenticity and say, absolutely, let's do it. How can I help you with this one? This department might say, hey, we're going to try it like this. Awesome. That's what I'm here to help you with this one. We can't be standardized in a lot of areas. When I had multiple sites, I had a site in Detroit and I had a site in Iowa, small town Iowa. So Detroit's metropolitan, small town Iowa, two completely different cultures. You can't have the same formula that worked in small town Iowa to bring it to Detroit.
Interesting.
It has to be different. But you use the management commitment and what they all agreed upon for the team, explain it to them, how you're going to do this, how you're going to implement this, and then go on from there.
Interesting, man.
I think that's the best way for me, that's been the best approach. So
you're really not dictating to them. You're asking them what their vision of that is, how they can participate and contribute, what they're willing to, and then find ways that you can assist them in doing that.
Nobody wants to be told what to do. You know what I mean?
At any level of the company. At any level,
especially some safety nerd, that wants to dictate how they need to run their department. And so just say how maybe they're like, we want to do some extra JSAs. Great. What do you need from me? How can I help you? I can grab the numbers. I can make sure I feed you the information day to day. all I'm asking you to do is just, you have to, that is your accountability for your team now.
Right.
That's your metric.
Right. If we've agreed upon this, let's make sure we're holding people to that.
TIR, like training, that's across the board, metric for every single plant. But if you want sub-metrics to really enhance the safety of your team, start having them choose what do they think is going to be best. Mm-hmm. Maybe they want to do safety debriefs. Great. How can I help you on that one? And so it's
maybe even suggesting some of these options that they're probably not even aware of.
Giving them a menu.
And say, here, we can do all of these different things. What do you think would be most valuable?
Because they know their team. They know the capability of their leadership there, their frontline leaders. Maybe they have a new person, so maybe doing something where, it's a little bit more technical may not be the fit. Maybe it's let's get some easy wins first, build some confidence.
I love that idea, man. I do think the easy wins are important for morale, for unity. Yeah. I think those things are critical, and we miss a lot that would be just low-hanging.
We look for the big picture, so so it's kind of like with football. Let's go to a cupcake school and let's kind of work on everything and we'll get the win and then we'll move on. Right. Get prepared. So
very good. That's really interesting, man. 15 years, you've come a long way. Yeah, that's really good. And so the management commitment, involvement piece. What about employee engagement? We used to say employee involvement, which I don't think is necessarily adequate. But what is the importance of that piece? Do you think it's important? I mean, we've been harping on it for years. And, even when I was with VPP, with OSHA, we had to identify 3 meaningful ways that the employees are involved in the program and write, as if, that was all that was necessary. What's your perspective on that at this point?
I think the employee involvement or engagement is critical for the success. I think management commitment is the umbrella and the foundation, and that's the foundation, and the employee participation is you start building on that for that culture, for that climate shift. And I don't think anybody has really nailed it down. I mean, I'm not going to say like this is what will be the best way to do it. But things that I've seen, everybody will go after the safety committee. Everybody will go after some other sort of committee. And I think that's great. I think we need to define what the involvement is going to be. Is it going to be us sitting around in a room talking about compliance issues and giving a maintenance team member or employee a to-do list? Or do you want them to be doing fire extinguishers? Or do we want them to do something more impactful? And that is creating, observations that I think that are easy for them to access, easy for them to use, and data that can be automatically trended for the safety person, which then gives us talking points, which then gives them direction as far as where they need to start focusing their attention on. I think that's important. I think having employee participation in the training aspect as well. So one of the gals that I worked with, we leveraged a lot of the employees on how they do things here just to make sure it's correct. So that way they had their fingerprint on that as well. So it wasn't a corporate driven training. It was multiple different groups of people getting involved. I think that's important as well.
It's kind of that learning team concept that Conklin and the safety differently folks talk about. When you are engaging employees in just identifying where their pain points are and how we might be able to help address some of those. I think it's easy as safety people or even managers to believe we know where the problems are based on our perception. But until you really engage with those employees and get a better understanding of what they're struggling with, it's hard to make decisions that don't affect them negatively.
Right. And I think also employee engagement, I always felt like it was us saying that you need to come participate in what we do. So safety committee, observations, all that kind of stuff. But the inverse is, why don't we go down there to the floor and work with them?
Mm-hmm.
That's engagement as well. And that's real. Like, if you really want to know what's going on, if you really want the tea, then go down there. They're going to tell you everything. Don't talk about safety. Nobody wants to talk about safety.
Right.
But at some point, something will get popped, or something will get or discussed, because they're out there. And so don't always think we don't have to overthink this. We don't have to say, like, we're going to make the best committee ever. We're going to do the best behavioral-based observations. We're going to do the best training while we're, like, those are great. And those are things that you should have engagement with. Like, just go out to the floor and work alongside with them. Not to police, not to just sit back and watch, but actually go work the line. See, coming to some of the pain points that they're going with. Like, man, this floor is pretty freaking rough. Like,
spend a day with them out there, and
we call them task engagements. That was one of the requirements I had with my team, is to get out to the floor. It's to build that trust and that communication.
I love that, man.
So that's
even better than just observing them.
Yeah,
because as you are standing there leaning against the post and just watching them work, it's easy to be critical, but until you've done the work, that's really insightful.
Yeah, that's engagement. Layered audits, so doing audits in sections. And so if you wanted to look at hot work, have your team engaged. I think this is better than behavioral. Behavioral base is like we're trying to identify things that we think is risky. For, like, let's say hot work, and they're doing a layered audit, we're going to see, hey, have you been trained? They're going to ask somebody, have you been trained on the hot work program? And they're going to say, I think so. All right, so yeah, actually you were, 2 months ago. Okay. Can you discuss where we can get hot work permits? Can you show us where the programs are at? If you see somebody doing this, what do you need? So we're kind of gauging the retention of the employee and see where we're failing at. Maybe we're not doing a good enough job explaining this in the training. And so those with the layered audits, they're in sections, and it gives us an idea of what people know on the floor, what they might not know, and how we can improve, or we can send out communication saying, hey, guys, 30% of the workforce said that they had no clue where our permits were at. This is where the permits are located at. And then you just discuss it, and you move on. But it's engagement from employee to employee. We're kind of getting
And so the employees are doing that amongst themselves. Yep. They're doing those audits.
Yeah, because like a lot of the behavioral base is they'll look and they'll say, like, oh, this person's lifting incorrectly. That's subjective. Oh, this person's driving too fast. That's subjective. Because I drive like a maniac, so I might be like, that's actually okay. I don't care.
Yeah.
But
well, it's interesting because
you narrow the scope down.
Risk is a very interesting phenomenon. We talk a lot about hazards and risk assessments and things. I think, at least as a consultant, my focus is more on hazard identification. This is obviously a problem, as I see it. And but risk is so individual. There's an uncertainty element to that. Some people, the risk is much higher doing the same job as another person who really has no risk doing the job, because this person either knows how to do it or understands the hazards of the work or whatever, and they're fairly certain. There's no there's no question. So trying to protect against risk is really challenging, because the old-fashioned OSHA way of, we did risk assessment, probability and severity, right? Which I think is so antiquated and probably inappropriate.
Yeah.
We would say, okay, well, you work around that 8 hours a day, so the probability of an issue is really high.
Yeah.
And if you actually hit that energy, the severity would be death. So it's a high grader. That would be OSHA parlance for, but that individual may never encounter that energy based on their understanding of the processes and things. So totally different than a new person coming in or someone else might. So that whole concept of risk is really interesting, and I think oftentimes misutilized. Like you just say, you can drive like a maniac and probably be perfectly safe as opposed to someone else. You know? So
that's one of those things where I think safety people, we tend to err on a side of caution, almost too much.
Yeah.
And then we create some really difficult boundaries for people to just do their job. And we got to remember, like, once again, let's fit safety into operations and operations into safety. So we have to figure out is this okay? Maybe you don't like it, then we better have a really good solution on how we're going to fix this problem. So, and not just address an issue and say, I don't like that. This looks really, really unsafe. Because nope, everybody wants the data, according to whom,
Right.
So,
it's interesting. I was at a client's facility yesterday, and I am watching two of the employees performing a task. There is a hazard involved, and I would say there is risk involved, but the two people they're long-term employees. They've been doing this for years, and they're all covered in PPE now. And I was asking one of the guys, the guy had been there like 30 years. What was it like back when you started? We didn't have any of this stuff. We didn't use any of this stuff. And I guess that's a natural evolution. We just cover people in PPE or whatever, whether it's necessary or not. It certainly looks good. It looks like we've done something. Man, we are a much safer company because we've just, covered them in all this gear in order to do this process. The employees roll their eyes quite a bit. And, I question sometimes whether or not we over safety certain things just for the show value of it, to be able to say, look what we've done. That's common, it seems.
Yeah, we always tend to PPE always is the first thing, and everybody knows the controls. We know that it starts. We know we can't substitute it. We don't have that power to be like, we need to change this out and do something different. Engineering takes forever because you have to get multiple different departments involved with engineering out the problems. So administrative PPE seem to be the ones that we have a little bit more say. And so kind of conflating those things together would be ideal. But yeah, that's kind of like the nature of the beast in some regard. I understand from a safety person that's really only the leverage that we have. I mean, we can suggest engineering stuff, but that's, once again, that's time, that's money.
It is.
And so unless you're a hybrid safety person that can do maintenance stuff as well, which those people are awesome. I love those people.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
They can weld.
I can't fabricate anything.
Right.
So, but that's kind of that's always been kind of the pain point. So we always have to rely on administrative controls. But if you don't really understand the hazard, then you're always going to go back down to PPE and say, we're going to be the mom off the Christmas story. And, just like put 3 coats on that person.
Yeah.
When really it could be just a time-weighted average. Maybe it could be a different rotation. It could be body positioning. It could be whatever it is. But that also needs to go, coincide with PPE because, once again, those are the 2 things that we have the most control over. And
it ultimately has to, as you had mentioned, it kind of has to coincide with the process. I mean, we have to be able to perform these processes. And, we can get to the point of being so restrictive that it's incredibly challenging. I guess there have been situations where the process was just so dangerous and so out of control that we had to eliminate it or something because it just could not be done to the point where we were comfortable that it was done safely, or as safely as possible. It wasn't enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess that does happen. So the third element, everything else is kind of contingent upon those 2. If you have a clear understanding of management commitment and involvement on the part of those managers, and you have these different means of engaging the employees in the process, then worksite analysis and, hazard evaluation and control, those things kind of flow from that.
Yeah.
Makes everything much easier. Training, as you mentioned, you talked about, but all of those things, one of the biggest complaints that I hear personally is this demand for documentation. Again, the plant I was at yesterday, they had a corporate person come through and they got dinged for not documenting testing of e-stops, light curtains, things like that. They do that but they don't have any documentation of it. And so they got the block checked, negative, because, and those are OSHA-driven demands. Those documentation requirements are primarily OSHA-driven to some extent, but that seems to be a pain for a lot of people. Just the magnitude of tracking all of this stuff and even identifying that stuff. It's tough, man. I don't know how, never having had to do it myself, I don't know how it's done.
It sucks because unless you're going to do it yourself, but it's really hard, cause especially with light curtains, because you have to understand how that all works. Like by the time you break the line, there has to be a certain stopping point and all that stuff.
There is a stop time consideration.
So normally now you're leaning on a maintenance person who's already, I'm assuming, overwhelmed with all these other tasks. And so now you're having them come around with a piece of paper, all this stuff. We don't really give them a direction. We just say, hey, OSHA says this. And that always makes everybody mad. Don't say that. Don't say that. Just say, hey, part of our machine guarding policy is that we do inspections of these. That's our expectation. Once again, that's management commitment that we will document all these things that will keep the employees safe. That's a better word, or that's better phrase than saying OSHA wants this.
I'm sure people are fatigued by hearing that.
Gosh, I'm fatigued by hearing that. Yeah. OSHA said this, or I'm so worried about. Just don't worry about OSHA. But what we can do is, what I've done is, we have to use technology and simplify it, so that way it's easy for them to scan and go. And so
talk about, you did this out of a need for yourself.
For myself.
You developed this, and come to find out you're a computer genius or something.
I'm definitely not a computer genius.
But that was the pain that drove you to develop. So talk about what you were doing, and then we can talk about how that applies.
Yeah, so I think if you ask any safety person ever in the history, what their pain points are, or hey, what's your day-to-day like? It's like, I'm just stuck in the office. I'm just doing all this paperwork, and I hate paperwork, and I that doesn't fill my bucket. Like, I know that's important, but it always ends up being in a pile next to my computer, and I'm like, one of these days I'll get to it, and I'll scan them all in. And so, understanding that was one of my flaws, and I think that's a lot of other people's flaws.
Most definitely.
Is I'm like, I don't find value in this, because I'm not reading it. I'm just making sure that this is signed, this is dated, and that's it. I'm going through the motion. So they're probably going through the motion. We're going through the motion, but it's just adding, I would say, maybe 5 to 10 hours a week. You could probably spend 25% of your work week just doing administrative stuff. And so I created a bunch of ways that I can streamline all this information, where it automatically will populate a grid without me ever having to do anything except to create it. And then I can create dashboards to see what's going on.
So give some examples of like what you're talking about.
So for instance, let's go something easy. Let's say like fire extinguishers. Let's say we don't have a third party coming in. We want to save some money. I would create barcodes for those fire extinguishers. And all you have to do, I created an app. You scan it with the app. It automatically knows the location, what fire extinguisher this is. I just say pass or fail. If I say fail, I have to take a picture and describe what it is. If it's passed, then hit submit. Automatically will populate the grid. And it takes like no time to do this. And so
no more time than it would take you to do your normal walk around audit.
Yeah. And so, but this time it's now documented into a grid. We can do this.
So you don't have to fill out those little freaking cards that are hanging on that extinguisher, which drove me crazy. I think that's such a waste.
Because once again, it's just another opportunity for them to see, like, hey, like, you didn't. Oh, you must have missed March. Well, no, actually, I didn't. I have everything documented. Fall protection. Do the same thing for fall harnesses, anchors, all of that. Scan it, the little barcode. It knows exactly what it is, the model number, serial number, pass or fail. Boom. No longer have to.
And so then you can see all this stuff on a dashboard. You could call. I want to see how the fire extinguishers are, compliance rate of
pass to fail and all of that stuff. And if you fail, then it will automatically trigger a notification to, let's say, the maintenance person who orders stuff, and say, you need to order a fire extinguisher, a 10-pound fire extinguisher here.
Okay.
So now there's no longer, we don't have to really communicate, because that person's getting a notification, and if they don't respond and say acknowledge to that, it'll continue to kick out a notification to them until they acknowledge it.
Okay.
So once again,
that.
Yeah, so because safety people, we forget there's so much stuff that we're getting day to day that we're also working on for long term. So we'll forget something like that. And so this is a good reminder for that person, hey, please order this fire extinguisher. Or it could be a notification to yourself saying, hey, order this fire extinguisher. So I use a lots of different software systems. There's so many now that you can use to just make things simpler. So for this e-stop thing, once again, I would barcode it, scan.
You'd put a barcode on the e-stop or at that point on the machine or something?
At that point, and that way you can just acknowledge that this was a pass-fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's gridded. So now, because what's the alternative? I have to write it on a piece of paper. You give it to me. Now I'm probably going to document it by either scanning them all in, right?
Right.
Which is a pain. Like how many? If you have a ton of machines with e-stops, we're talking an hour or two of scanning and documents, saying which one they are, or the barcodes already has that locked in to, like, this is machine line 101, pass.
So you have a little bit of upfront time investment, and then it's over. You don't have to deal with that crap.
That's the return on investment. We're going to spend some time creating that, but then on the back end of it, keeps us making sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is these inspections, and no longer do we have to do double the amount of exchange of paper to back to computer. Crazy.
I was eavesdropping on you talking with a client friend of mine about setting up a landing page.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there just thinking, thank God I'm retiring soon. But the two of you understood what you were saying. It involved accessing electronic access to forms and things.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that a little bit and how that works? Because I still don't get it.
So the great thing about QR codes, are more accessible. They're really easy to follow. And I think, but the burden part of the QR code, which I've learned, is that I have a QR code for incident reporting. I have a QR code for hazard assessments. I have a QR code for PIVs. I have a QR code
SDSs.
for SDSs. So now you have one QR code was cool. Everybody was gung-ho. And your two QR codes are like, okay, I can get on board. And then you have 10 of them. They're like, okay.
You have the back of the bathroom stall door is all QR codes.
It's just a QR code frenzy. And once again, I'm a very efficient person. I like efficiency. And one thing that safety people love is we would love to have access to everything. We can talk about SharePoint, but SharePoint is still you still have to update. It's kind of a mess too to get access to give people access. Unless you're really good at it, if that's your thing, go for it. But for me, it was I'm like, I wanted to create one QR code that put me into a landing page where I can access everything that I discussed. Maybe it's training. Maybe it's SOPs. Maybe it's all of our safety manual. Maybe it's the incident reporting, near-miss reporting. It's all of these things that, as a safety person, man, I wish I had access to, where I could see everything instead of me going to different folders that were hidden, that you had to do the freaking like Rubik's Cube to unlock it, just to see where did I put that form? Yeah, and so this was where everything lies at. And the thing is, it's not really for me, but it's for the employee. We want to give them access to everything.
What they need access to.
They're not at the computer enough, but they shouldn't be anyways, for them to understand where everything is at. We know where it's at, but they don't know where it's at. But then we get upset. We're like, well, the policy is in this folder. Okay, like that doesn't.
Everything's posted on that shared drive.
Yeah, they can go to the computer that's all the way down there to report an incident. They're not going to do that.
They don't. They don't.
So what if we created one QR code that took them to a landing page, and then it had access to everything that they needed? And that's what I created. And I think it looked, It looks great, and
Yeah.
it takes you to every avenue that you want as a safety person that your team needs to know.
And so could you set it up so that employees have access to this, and then maybe managers have access to maybe an expanded version of that, or would that be a separate QR code maybe, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, you can create different QR codes. So let's say that employee, you just want them to have access to reporting, incident reporting, near-miss reporting, property damage programs, maybe your cardinal rules, and some toolbox talks. That's it. And that's their landing page. And supervisors will have a different QR code that gives them all of that, but gives them more. You know, so
because as we were discussing this with Brandon, with our colleague friend, we had talked about even putting that QR code on a hard hat or something,
Yes.
so you could walk up to your buddy and pop. I don't know what do you call that when you access a QR code? You
just scan
the QR code,
scan it, and then it'll
pull you to that page, and then I could find a data sheet if I wanted it. I could find that form that I need to submit.
Again, maybe
I could even find a work process. I mean, if you want to inspect a piece of equipment, here's the inspection sheet for that. You know, you're required to do that before you use it or something.
Yeah, and it's one that can automatically, you would fill it out on your phone and then click submit. Once again, that populates your grid. So now we have documentation, and then that grid we can control what data that you want from that. And
so you could push out a toolbox talks and say, you know, Monday morning, read the toolbox talk. We're going to have a post workday brief, and we'll talk about that information. But you can get to it. You're expected to read it. You can somehow acknowledge that they read it.
Yep. So what they'll do is they'll read the toolbox talk, and I'll create a link on that toolbox talk where they click, and all they have to do is just put in they'll automatically date stamp it. They put in their name, they put in the location, and maybe there'll be a couple questions about it. It's just nothing too hard, and click submit, and they're done.
Okay. I love that, man.
It's easy.
So have you'd implemented that? I mean, is it?
Yeah.
It's working?
Yeah. It's working. So
very cool.
It's awesome. And so it's one of those where if you're a safety person and I know the pain points are, I mean, just let us know, let Fletch know, and we'll figure out a way.
You can do that for other people.
Yeah,
You've been doing that for some of my clients.
Yeah. So it's really, really cool. It's gonna make your life easier. It's gonna make everybody's life easier. Because I know paperwork seems to be and to me it's always, I'm a dreamer, which like I'm always like thinking, there's really nothing that you can't come up with that I don't think we would be able to create. You know, so if there's anything that's, man, like I'd really love to have this on here, let's do it. The visitor access too. So when you're going to a site, now you just would scan a QR code. It gives you the visitor information, click submit, and then you now have to type in like, okay, like I acknowledge these things,
right?
My name. Who am I here to see? Let's say I'm a compliance officer. I'm a compliance officer for OSHA, and once I hit submit, it'll send an email to everybody or the management team on site. There's an OSHA compliance officer at the site.
So you have that QR code like right on your front door that says OSHA must.
It's any visitor coming in there because it'll blink them down. So they'll say, are you a visitor? Are you here for are you a regulatory agency? Are you a contractor? So they have to choose that one. Whichever one they choose, we just automate the workflow and just say, all right, well, now you chose, let's say, an OSHA inspector. It's going to the management team, but it's also going to some of the corporate team. That's the cool thing, too. So that way, the safety person on site, they don't have to lose their mind and, I forgot to let corporate know. Just know they already know. Just go do the opening conference. Once you're done, then you can email back that team and say, this is why they're here.
Right. Well, and likewise, I mean, when I used to talk to people about OSHA inspections, they would always put together their contingency, and they'd have this sheet of paper stuffed in a notebook up at the front of the desk, and the receptionist or the administrative person would have to go through, and if they had immediate access to that they could do that themselves, like the OSHA person would be required to check in, and the admin person up front could just hit the code that immediately OSHA is on site, and disseminates all this information just to make sure that everybody's been notified, whatever that is. But the days of opening up a hard copy notebook and looking for the page, and it was just so cumbersome, man.
It is, and it's
ineffective.
It's 2024 now, and we use technology for everything. So the fact that if we're still using paper and pencil and scanning stuff in, that is not the way that you want to go, because there's so many different systems out there, and you don't need to be an expert at it. I mean, I can help.
You can set it up so that it doesn't require a real knowledge of.
No, and it's super easy, and I think they'll enjoy it because it's data that is important to that person,
and useful.
We can customize it for them. So
and just how many companies still have folders and piles of inspections, and I was always concerned that even if you're doing inspections, they're not resulting in an action necessarily.
Right.
I'm finding deficiencies on my forklift inspections, but nothing is being triggered.
Right.
How does that trigger some type of action?
Yeah.
Or, I know people were trying really hard to follow these instructions, but, there's always a point where the system breaks down if it requires paper and individuals to process it.
Yeah, and it's not a perfect system. I don't ever want to say like this, I solved the problem. Sure. But it makes your life easier. And so let's say there's an issue with steering or braking. So that's a big no-no for forklifts. So let's say, this forklift that brakes didn't really
They're not
do
working
as well
as
they should be. It'll automatically send. You won't be able to continue the inspection once you hit that.
Once you've hit a disqualifier.
You can't submit it now. But what it will do is it will send out a notification to the maintenance team, to the safety person, that this forklift is no longer can be used until it's fixed. So now they can circumvent that by hitting yes, but once again, that's a behavioral issue.
Right.
So you can have
that would be addressed through different means typically.
So, and if you have InfoLink or any of those other systems that are built onto the forklift itself, same thing. Once you hit no, it shuts down the equipment. But if you hit yes, then
if you miss,
then you can go back
input.
in there. Yeah. So it's once again, every system can be circumvented, but
sure,
it's just.
But why?
Yeah. That's the question. If they do say yes when it's really a no, that's something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
So is it pressure from?
And no system can overcome that until they're doing their own. The machine does its own diagnostic.
You're dealing with people with different behaviors and different. Different reasons as to why they may have done that. Once again, it could be pressure from the top. Like, we're in a really busy season. We have to go. Maybe it's their internal. I just need to get the job done. I can deal with this. Maybe they don't. I really identify this as a risk. Those are those things where once you get to that point, then you have to start breaking down, cause mapping, why that decision was made. Maybe it's multiple different decisions. Maybe it's most likely you'll find out that it was probably more of a management system that failed. Maybe it was a management team that didn't understand commitment of safety, and so we forced them to do things that were unsafe because of we needed to go. So
I'm having this vision of putting these QR codes on the entry point of confined spaces. And so now I can actually access either the permit for a permit required confined space entry and complete that, or I pull up the reclassification form because, if I can lock it out and de-energize this space and eliminate the hazards prior to entry, I can reclassify it. And that's a different code. But on the, at the entry points of these different, I just think, that would eliminate some of the confusion. The correct permit or reclassification form is accessed, and I can fill that out before entry. Could you do something like that? I mean, it sounds like you could do anything that is done with a paper permit or other kind of archaic means. You could, I mean, I have a lot of issues with, which form do I complete, and eventually we'll eliminate forms altogether at some point. But in the meantime, you could certainly reduce, the burden of that employee having to decide.
Mm-hmm. No, now that you're saying that, I'm like thinking about how this would work, but I do think that would be actually.
It seems like you could access those.
Access the entire.
Because, or even like a barcode. This space has a specific barcode that accesses the appropriate permit.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a little bit of upfront energy, but downstream it just eliminates so much.
It's so
crap.
simple and it's not that much work, but it does make things a lot simpler downstream.
I wonder, non-routine tasks and helping. A lot of people will fill some type of JSA, JHA, non-routine task paperwork. I wonder if there would be a way to, store all that information and then prompt you as you're going through, did you think about this? Have you considered this?
Mm-hmm.
Because the point of the non-routine task is to try to identify risk hazards that we are unfamiliar with because we don't do something regularly.
Right.
But that data, you fill one out and it gets lost, it gets stuck in a pile somewhere. It would be nice if it would be like learning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about this? Or prompt you a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. So my always question is, what is non-routine task?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the question.
How do you define that?
How do you define that? And so the way that I defined it, which I thought was the easiest, do you have an SOP or SWI for this task, or do you not?
Mm-hmm.
If you do, and if you have it and it's been reviewed within a year, you're good to go.
Mm-hmm. Just follow the SOP.
Just follow SOP. Now, part of that, the caveat is because what if the only time that you would have to access a hazard assessment on this, if you have the SOP for a year, would be what has changed. Did personnel change? Then if somebody else, like let's say you came now and wanted to help, now we have to do a hazard assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Are we outside and the environment went from really calm and sunny to now it's really windy?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well now we have to redo a hazard assessment. So if there's, or do you have a new employee with you, then I'm going to have to fill one out regardless because I want them to understand not just the steps, but the why behind the steps and explain the hazards. Now, if you don't have an SOP or you have an SOP, but it hasn't been reviewed within a year, automatically that to me is non-routine work.
Triggers non-routine.
And that's when you have to fill out an SOP. I do like the branching of, are there any health hazards, i.e. Chemical, dust, whatever that is, and you can say you're looking at the steps and you say, actually, yeah, okay, then it'll branch down to more questions.
Yeah.
Is there electrical hazards? That can easily be done.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So,
I mean, it's just limited by your imagination.
Yeah.
Truthfully, the utility of this process.
Yeah, don't make it so cumbersome where they're like stuck doing this.
Right. We don't want to get down that path. It's basically the paperwork path if it becomes too cumbersome.
Yeah. But hit the main points.
If people are interested in more information about this, I'll post your email in the liner notes of the episode. How do they get a hold of you if they are interested in maybe exploring this utility? How do you want them to reach you?
Through you.
They can come through me.
They can
certainly.
go through you. So
absolutely, I can get them in touch with you. No problem.
That's always easy. But
I'll put that contact information in the notes.
To me, that's always been the biggest pain point. Having the manual and everything, commitment, engagement. That's always difficult. That's a difficult. These are two separate things, but you could focus on the people, the engagement, the management, commitment, the training, all of that, which I think is more value added, instead of dealing with paperwork. I hate paperwork, man.
Yeah, you could get out there and actually get on the line and work with them and learn what they're going through. That would be really nice.
Instead of just like, what do you do? And say, oh, I'm scanning in documents from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, nobody.
I'm not. I don't trend anything. We're just being compliant.
We're just capturing it and storing it.
Wouldn't it be great to see
until we delete it all?
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great to see trends of like specific hazards that were identified? Because that, once again, now you can start directing the ship where we need to go.
Yeah.
And then now you have purpose. It's not just, hey, I'm going to we're just going to pick out a topic for this month. Like, there should be purpose now of why you're doing it. And then that, to me, that is your leading indicator, proactive approach, where you can start forecasting possibly people's risk within the facility. It's not going to solve it, but man, you could really reduce a lot of your risk if you have just things that are automated that you can automatically see, instead of you putting all the information into Excel. Let's hit a pivot table. All right, now that's too much work, man.
That's a lot of work.
That's too much work.
I totally agree, man. We've got to streamline this to the extent that we are able.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just doesn't
solve the problem, but it does reduce a lot of the burden from the paperwork.
I love it. Yeah, 15 years, man. I mean, I can remember when you were like brand new and you were kind of compliance fixated, as 100. We all were, and now I'm learning stuff from you every day, which is remarkable, 15 years later. So just good for you,
seasoned, man.
Never stop learning.
Yeah, never stop learning.
I think that's a big part of this.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. It's been interesting. I do think that what you are talking about would benefit lots and lots of people. So if you want more information, if you want to meet or speak with Kody, get in touch with me, or you can contact him through the information that I'll leave in the liner notes under the episode. And, get out there on the floor and actually do some work for a change. So everybody have a great weekend.
See you guys.
Those of you that are marching in the march, all respect, I hope you have a great march. It's for an incredible cause. So good luck with that. And we will talk to you next time.
Yep.
Have a good weekend. Later.
See ya.